Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Our division previews continue. We're getting closer to Eagles kickoff. By the time we finish our previews next week with the NFC East, the Eagles will be playing on Saturday night, and then Andrew will be here all season long to take a look at the Birds. But right now, let's take a look at the NFC South. Buccaneers 8-9. They won the division last year, making the playoffs. Panthers, Saints, and Falcons all 7-10. So all four teams finished within one game of each other. So who's the favorite this year? Who is the team in the NFC South that might represent them? We think there's probably only going to be one. We'll see what Andrew thinks. We'll take a look at these four teams. Andrew DiCecco from InsideTheBirds.com and the Inside the Birds podcast joins us right now as we continue along our NFC South preview is today. What's going on, Andrew?
Hey, Mike, how are you, man?
All is good, buddy. We are getting closer to kickoff tonight, the Hall of Fame game. We got Jets and Browns, and you can hear the game on 97.3 ESPN. But today we're looking at the NFC South. This is probably the worst division in a team with a losing record won last year. And let's start right at the most important division. Baker Mayfield, Kyle Trask. How does that battle end up in Tampa Bay?
Well, I think Baker Mayfield will probably take the reins early on before ultimately assuming, to sort of giving way to Kyle Trask. I think Kyle Trask, right now at least, appears to be the future for them right now. And we'll have to see how he's able to do. I mean, he's had some time to acclimate to the offense. He has a couple of veteran receivers to work with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. And Tristan Wirfs, at left tackle, of course, is one of the best in the business. So he does have some components around him to be successful. But I think ultimately Baker Mayfield will probably get the ball to start.
All right, if Baker Mayfield gets that job, what does he have to work with? Because, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, looks like he's got some fun pieces. How should this offense be?
Well, the running back situation is kind of interesting. Rashad White and Chase Edmonds, they're both diminutive type of running backs that I think can be assets in the passing game. They don't really have that bruiser, in my opinion, that's going to be able to get the short yardage for them. But you look at Mike Evans, he's a go-up-and-get-it receiver, very physical at the catch point and an alpha. And Chris Godwin is that short to intermediate option, very solid hands, tough over the middle, a type of player that every quarterback really needs and they can rely on. And Russell Gage is there. Many may remember him from his days with the Falcons. So those are the wide receivers. And then the tight end, Cade Otton, is somebody they drafted in the fourth round last year. He's going to get a chance for a more prominent role this year. And then we mentioned Tristan Wirfs at left tackle. How about Cody Mauch, drafted in the second round last year or in April out of North Dakota State? He's probably going to be their right guard by all indications. So they have some interesting pieces there. They do have some holes, but I think it's worth mentioning that they do have some pieces to work with.
And we know, this is a team that went to a Super Bowl and won a Super Bowl not so long ago, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and they did it when they had a really good defense. So what's that defense looking like? You got Kalijah Kancey. He was a guy that a lot of people thought the Eagles might be interested in. Vita Vea over there, Devin White, Levante David. So they do have Winfield. They've got some interesting names on that defense.
Yeah, Kalijah Kancey surprised me a little bit. As we got further through the draft process, I really had him pegged as an early second-round pick, given the efficiency and things like that, his arm size and like that. But he's going to be pairing with Vita Vea, who you mentioned. The linebacker situation really jumps out. Devin White, Levante David. When you really look at Levante David's body work in his career, I mean, that's a Hall of Fame caliber resume if you look at it. Shaq Barrett's there. The defensive back situation, you have Jamel Dean, Ryan Neal, who came over from Seattle. I thought that at one point surely the Eagles would have had interest, but that wasn't to be. Antoine Winfield's there. Zion McCollum, he's their nickel corner. I really liked him out of Sam Houston State. Some may remember, whoever listened to the Draft Dreams podcast I had on InsideTheBirds.com. He was a player that I spoke to and had an extensive conversation with. So I do like some of their back-end pieces.
Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4, taking a look at Tampa Bay in the NFC South. Now, this is a team that was 8-9 last year with Tom Brady. We like a lot of their pieces. They seem to have some interesting players here. But overall, it sounds like Tampa Bay, most people think you're going to take a step back.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, this division in general really doesn't have a heavyweight. Now there is a team that I like, and we'll get to them. We'll get to them shortly. But I think I don't want to give it away, but I have them somewhere as a middling team in this division.
All right, let's talk about the New Orleans Saints here. They went out and got, I would imagine, if you're ranking the quarterbacks in the South, Derek Carr and Jameis Winston, the backup there. You would imagine that Carr is the best quarterback in this division here. Would you look at Carr? The Saints have clearly upgraded at that position.
Oh, easily. And I think you can make a case for him being in a new location. I think a change of scenery is really going to have weapons to work with. And I really do think that, I mean, when you look at their offensive line, for instance, they have four former first-round picks, including Ryan Ramczyk, who I love. They have a double-headed rushing attack. And they have the receiver. I mean, Michael Thomas, Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed is a player who I really like, and I think that he's going to emerge this year. You saw him. Eagles fans may remember him beating James Bradbury down the field for like a 50-yarder when they played on New Year's Day. A lot of speed. So he does have an amalgam of weapons, I think, to work with, and it's up to him to maximize it. But he's certainly going to have the protection up front to do so.
Yeah, Kamara obviously has been an elusive player in this league. You mentioned Olave. Michael Thomas had his injury problems. That could be an interesting offense there. And then Carr gives them a much better player at that position. They've been an interesting defense, too. This is a team that a lot of people thought was going to be really bad. The Eagles fans were hoping for. They went 7-10 last year. But their defense was kind of stubborn, if you will, last year.
Yeah, they were, and I think that really was the phase of the game that really uplifted their team. They didn't really have a lot to hang their hat on offensively, but I think defensively, when you look at Cam Jordan, he's been a mainstay there. They added Colin Saunders, a defensive lineman who came over from the Kansas City Chiefs. They drafted Brian Brzee in the first round, defensive lineman out of Clemson. They also drafted Isaiah Folksy in the second round. So they have a couple of building blocks there to go along with a couple of the veteran components that they have. Linebacker Pete Warner, Zach Bond, safety Tyrann Mathieu. They have Marcus May, and then in the secondary, Marcus Lattimore. For some reason, every year he seems to be perennially underrated, but he's a shutdown corner. Bradley Roby at nickel. You have Alontae Taylor, who they drafted in the second round in 2022. So, I mean, I think the Saints defense is going to be certainly respectable once again.
That could be one of the differences for them this year next to some of these other teams. We'll see what Andrew thinks about how this division will stack up in just a minute. Let's go to Atlanta. This team's fun, man. All of a sudden, you've been drafting high. You got some fun pieces. Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Kyle Pitts. But who's going to throw them the football?
Well, you have Desmond Ridder, and you also have Taylor Heineke. So, I mean, I think Ridder's going to be their future, and at least in the interim, and I think he's going to comfortably stave off Heineke through camp. And then it becomes interesting because you have Bijan Robinson, who's going to be a focal point, obviously. Tyler Algier had a really nice year last year, so they have a two-headed rushing attack. Kyle Pitts obviously did not live up to expectations. The offense in general last year was really stagnant and dormant, and they didn't really I mean, Olamide Zaccheaus, I think, had averaged the most yards per catch last year, and he's far from being one of those explosive type of downfield threats when you think of his game. But Drake London, Mac Hollins, I mean, I don't know if anybody saw the video on Twitter, but he looks like he added some size and some explosiveness in the offseason. And then they have Scott Miller, who is going to be their slot receiver. He came over, of course, from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Offensive line, Jake Matthews is still there. He was drafted in the first round back in 2014, believe it or not. Matt Bergeron, they drafted him in the second round this year. Chris Lindstrom's still there at guard, and Caleb McGarry is still there at right tackle.
Yeah, this team on offense with some young pieces, but who's going to play quarterback could be the biggest question for them, as you mentioned, Ridder and Heineke. But Robinson, London, Pitts, those are three very high drafted players. On the defensive side of the ball here, you know, this has been their problem for the last couple of years. Their offense hasn't been great. They have inconsistent quarterback play, but their defense hasn't stopped anybody either. Will that change?
Man, they're really old on the defensive line. Calais Campbell, Grady Jarrett. They added David Onyemata from the Saints. Zach Harrison, they did draft in the third round in April, so he gives them a little bit of youth there. But they have a lot of aging players there. At linebacker, you have Bud Dupree, Caden Ellis. Defensive back, A.J. Terrell is a player who I really like. Jesse Bates, of course, he came over from the Cincinnati Bengals, one of the preeminent safeties in the league right now. Jeff Okuda is there, formerly of the Detroit Lions, and Mike Hughes is their nickel corner. So I don't think that they have a lot of world beaters there. They have some individual talent, but collectively, I'm not overly impressed with what they have.
All right, Atlanta, obviously a team that not a lot of high expectations there either. They finished 7-10 last year. And then the third team in that division who also finished at 7-10 last year, that was the Carolina Panthers, and we obviously know Carolina is a pretty interesting story. So let's start with Bryce Young. Andy Dalton's the backup. Mike Corral, actually, a pretty well thought of quarterback at the college level a couple of years ago. So they have three interesting quarterbacks, but Bryce Young looks like he's going to be the starter. What are your thoughts on him in year one?
Well, I think he's going to be set up for success. And what I mean by that is you have a veteran like an Adam Thielen at wide receiver. You have DJ Chark. These are guys that have played a lot of snaps in this league. Hayden Hurst has really emerged as a tight end later in his career. Tommy Treble is another tight end who's a movable piece that I like. Offensive line, you have a left tackle who you drafted in the first round in 2022, Ikem Ekwonu. And Jonathan Mingo, let's not forget about him. I mean, they drafted him in the second round in 23. So it's not like he's going into an offense with a barren cupboard of offensive firepower. So I think that's ultimately going to help his transition. And then we can't forget to mention Miles Sanders and Chuba Hubbard, who I think is going to be a pretty formidable rushing attack. Miles Sanders, I think, could benefit, on working with Deuce Staley again there. So that'll be a name to watch and an offense to watch, really, because I think that they have some exciting pieces.
Yeah, Bryce Young should be interesting to see if he can make it through the whole season. That's been one of the knocks on him is the size there. Miles Sanders, as you mentioned, and then some veterans in Thielen and DJ Chark there. So some weapons for Young, and we'll see if Carolina, who also had some quarterback issues last year, but man, they were very solid defensively here. So let's get your take on how this team will be defensively in 2023, because they got a lot of interesting names on that side of the ball.
Yeah, I think that defensive dominance is going to continue once again. Derek Brown on the D-line. Really liked him a lot coming out in 2020. The linebacker situation, they have a plethora of pass rushers that can really bear down on opposing quarterbacks. Yetur Gross-Matos from Penn State, Shaq Thompson, Brian Burns. Defensive backs, I mean, listen to this lineup. You have Jeremy Chin. You have Von Bell, Xavier Woods, who was a former starter with the Dallas Cowboys, J.C. Horn. Who else am I forgetting? Dante Jackson. So, I mean, they have a lot of interchangeable pieces there, and it's going to be interesting to see how they deploy those guys. But, I mean, man, they have a lot of guys that they can really make it difficult for opposing passers.
Yeah, I think if you take a look at defensively, they might be one of the better defenses in the NFC.
Oh, easily. And I think that's what's going to kind of, rank them a little higher on my projection, at least, than what many may think on the surface.
All right. So we had last year Tampa Bay make the playoffs 8-9. No Tom Brady. We got the Panthers 7-10. First pick in the draft, Bryce Young. He'll take over there. Saints, they have a new quarterback. Derek Carr takes over there. And the Falcons, Desmond Ridder. So all four teams in this division have changed quarterbacks. So will that change the standings here?
Well, I like the Saints at the top spot. Then I like Carolina. Then I like Tampa Bay. And last but not least, the Atlanta Falcons.
So Falcons picking up the rear again. You're not a Ridder fan?
No, I mean, I think their quarterback situation is really going to be to their detriment. I don't. If you have two guys that you're sort of deliberating between throughout the offseason, and neither of those guys are, they don't necessarily move the needle, I think that right there is going to spell problems. You already had that experience that last year with Marcus Mariota, and I think that's going to kind of be a sign of things to come here. I really don't like what they have there, especially on the defensive side. So, I mean, there's not a lot of guys outside of like Bijan Robinson, Kyle Pitts, and a couple of others that really jump out as sort of bona fide star power.
All right. That division, probably just one playoff team, and Andrew likes the Saints. I would have to agree. I think if I'm picking that one, the Saints probably win the South. I think Carr is just far and away. Depends on what happens with Bryce Young. But Carr is by far the most accomplished quarterback in the NFC South. Our previews will continue next Thursday. We'll look at the NFC East, the probably most entertaining division, maybe in all of football, but on the NFC side of things. And then, of course, we'll have the Eagles and the Ravens next Saturday night right here on 97.3 ESPN. Browns and Jets tonight. Andrew DiCecco, football's back, buddy.
Yep, I won't be watching that. I'll be going to a concert, the band Kicks. You may remember from the 80s.
I certainly where are they playing?
They're playing in Delaware.
All right, good for you, man. Finish the season.
They got a couple of shows left before they retire. I'm not missing it.
No, I was going to say couple. I didn't know they were still touring. By the way, what are you going to go? A little Cold Blood, the Itch tonight?
Oh, I love it. Yeah, man. I'm glad that I did not know you were a Kicks guy. But
I know a little Kicks, a little glam metal for you, baby. How about a little Blow My Fuse, Bennett? Right? All right, let's.
Yeah, they're going to close it. That's a phenomenal live act, man. My hats are off to them. They're still rocking at 40 years doing it. So
yeah, all right.
All the respect.
I love rocking the summer concert series with a little Kicks, Girl Money. How about that? All right, there's my Kicks knowledge for you. Andrew DiCecco has way more Kicks knowledge than I do, though. But all right, buddy, enjoy the show tonight.
All right, Mike. Take care. Talk soon.
All right. Kicks out of Hagerstown, Maryland. I know driving through, that's how I know them a little bit. Driving through to West Virginia, they're in that Hagerstown, one of those two, out that way. You go to drive from here to West Virginia, and, Kicks. There you go. Andrew's a big glam hair metal band guy. Great stuff from Andrew DiCecco. As always, we'll do the NFC East next week. Here on the Sports Pass Live, 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.